Hey guys, Series 2. Once again, we're going to put together some videos today just to run down very quickly. This is just meant to be a recap, not a ultimate teaching tool, but those of you who might be struggling with the battles that we've discussed in class, this video is meant to help you out a little bit. This is going to be a series of this is number 2 in a series of 3, and we're going to start off with the Battle of New York. If you remember, also called the Battle of Long Island, and this is basically where 32,000 British soldiers show up and face Washington's 19,000 soldiers. It's supposed to be a decent battle, but right away we realize that we are outmatched in every way, shape, and form. Washington is not commanding soldiers. He is commanding farmers who have very little military training, and time again we just begin to falter. Washington's leadership may be strong, but he begins to question himself. He's not sending direct orders to his commanders about how to manage this battle. Things like, would you kindly please if it's not too much trouble? That doesn't sound like a direct order if you're a military commander. So Washington's really struggling with this, and many of the soldiers are killed in this battle. It's a solid whooping. Fort Washington falls. This is something that they spent a lot of time preparing for the British assault, and that fort falls very, very easily to especially a group of Hessian soldiers there. So ultimately, Washington doesn't have much of a choice other than to continue to fall back. And as he's falling back, I mean, a small little window is left by Howe at that time, and Washington has the ability of slipping through. You remember the execution of Nathan Hale occurs during this whole Battle of Long Island time period, and Hale is picked up during a suspicious fire that breaks out in New York. And while the fire is burning, of course, some British soldiers happen to see him, and they're, hey, come here, and they bring him over and they start searching him, and they don't like his answers. And ultimately, they find a count of both troops and cannon hidden in the soles of his boots, and that is basically when he is executed the next morning. And, you know, his only regret is that he has but one life to give for his country. So ultimately, as Washington, his army is failing and they begin to falter, Washington is forced to fall back, and he has to do a retreat in the middle of the night. And it takes much longer than what Washington is hoping for. It's not very organized, once again, and the men are left to creep through fog that is left over through the evening, and thank goodness, because the fog helps to shroud their movements throughout the evening as they cross over that river. The last to go, of course, was the artillery. So ultimately, New York is a terrible, awful disaster for us, and everyone starts to wonder whether Washington is the guy for the job or not. He's really in a bind. Of 19,000 soldiers, he's down to like less than 5,000 soldiers now. 2,400 of those are going to run out the January 1st of the year, and he knows that how do you fight against 32,000 soldiers with 2,600? So he's really desperate, and he decides he's going to do this desperate attack against Trenton, New Jersey. Basically, on Christmas Day, he begins to load up some boats, and Christmas Day, right around dark time, and they begin crossing the Delaware River. Their goal is to capture these Hessian soldiers, the mercenaries, if you remember, from Germany. The painting that you see here is an artist's depiction of him actually crossing the Delaware River. Of course, if you paid attention in class, you know this is not very historically accurate because it would be black. They crossed in the middle of the night, and Washington probably was not standing up in the boat. But it was a horrible crossing. If you can see here, the ice, they had to pick their way across ice to get to the opposite shore on the other side. So not a very nice trip. Once again, some amazing things happen here. I'm going to move my, ready, move. There we go. Divine Providence plays several roles at Trenton. The earlier skirmish from the woods, they thought was the attack that they had been warned about coming, and it was just who knows who these guys were. And then ultimately, Hessian Commander Rahl is handed a letter while he's playing cards from a farmer in the area saying, I saw the Patriots, they're coming. What's he do? He folds it up and he puts it in his coat pocket, never looks at it at all. So pretty amazing stuff. Ultimately, by dawn the next morning, Washington is in place. Around 10 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, sorry, the battle takes over, and by 10 it's all over with. But basically, you're getting the idea here. You can see the Hessian soldiers on the ground. Not one colonial is killed or injured in this attack. So it's a fantastic victory for the Americans, and it really lifts our spirits, boosts our morale, and makes us begin to believe in ourselves again. Valley Forge, okay, is going to occur shortly after this. This is the site in which Washington is going to winter with the troops. And it's not really a battle site, but it's a place where a battle was fought within the spirit of the Revolution. Men went without in very extreme conditions. They didn't have shoes, so they wrapped their feet in cloth. And by some miracle, as Washington called it, they stayed day after day, night after night. The community begins to pull together, sending supplies that are desperately needed for the men. And yeah, I mean, the sad truth is that in Pennsylvania, we had lots of farms, but the Pennsylvania farmers were gouging the Continental Army, charging outrageous prices for supplies that were needed. So ultimately, you know, just look at the images here. These are not a place where you would want to spend 3 hard months of winter, and the men somehow endured. There's countless images out there that you can go ahead and take a look at, but just cold, nasty conditions. They don't have Gore-Tex and Thinsulate. The men were cold, they were freezing, there was very little food, and yet somehow they stayed. And for that, by the end, what you're going to see is sort of an invigorated spirit in the Americans. You know, an image here, there's a couple of artist renditions here of Washington praying, probably looking for some type of guidance. But the American Army comes out of Valley Forge more resolved that the worst had passed and the victory was in their grasp. So they would just have to endure, and possibly divine providence would prevail. And then last but not least, here we're going to talk about the Battle of Saratoga. This is that quick one in which, if you remember, September of 1777, the Americans do win. It is a turning point in the war, and the leaders were Benedict Arnold and John Burgoyne, kind of, sort of. I don't like this slide. Don't forget Gates. Okay, basically, if you remember, Burgoyne is going to come down out of the north. See, here's Albany. You've got St. Leger is going to come from Albany, and Gates was supposed to come from down south from Philadelphia, and he never even gets the memo to join the party. You know that Benedict Arnold defeats St. Leger here at Fort Stanwix, and all that is really left in this 3-legged attack is John Burgoyne. Horatio Gates is put in charge, but you remember Horatio Gates. Though he is in charge, he and Benedict clash very publicly, and you can see here, I think this is an artist rendition here of basically Benedict leading this charge to take out those British forces, and ultimately we do have a Patriot victory at Saratoga. This is supposed to be an artist rendition. You've got Gates here, okay? This is Burgoyne, and then you have Benedict over here, the final surrender at Saratoga. And it's a big deal because our victory at Saratoga, after that, France is willing to join us. It boosts our American spirits. We start thinking, holy cow, we might win this thing. And ultimately, it ends the British threat to New England. So a big series of events that's going to set up the last parts of the battles in the South. So hopefully this helped you guys understand it a little bit better. For right now, we'll call that the end for this little video clip, and we'll have one more edition after this. All right, as always, good luck. We'll see you the next time.